Alright, so we have quite an intriguing fight here with Youssef Zalal versus Sean Woodson. Sean Woodson, quite a large frame for the division. He's got 4 inches in height on Zalal and 4 inches in reach. And for Youssef, he's been very active. 6th fight in 16 months, so that's pretty active in the UFC. Quite impressive. Alright, so we'll get into the striking of these two. So for Zalal, he uses a lot of footwork. He's very agile on the feet. He has good lateral movement. He's mostly looking to hit you and then get back onto his bike. And for Sean Woodson, he's pretty happy to hit you just at distance, and he does have quite the range that he can, hit you at. Because, quite a long reach for featherweight. What's that? 200 centimeters, 79 inches. That's quite a crazy reach for a featherweight fighter. And, Zalal's frame's quite long too, but, not to this extent. So yeah, as I said, he's pretty happy just to touch you at distance. Like, he doesn't put a lot behind his strikes. He's more of a volume guy. But yeah, he can usually hit you where you generally can't hit him. That's because of the length that he has, just, naturally. But he's constantly feinting. He's constantly feinting knees, feinting kicks, feinting punches. He's always offering you, different angles that he's going to be entering at. Also switches the stance quite frequently. He's a very educated striker, and he does use his length quite well. At distance, he's mostly looking for that 1-2, straight knee in orthodox when the opponent, closing distance. Generally throws it on shorter fighters, so it won't be as available on Zalal, but I can still see him looking for it as well. In southpaw, generally throws the same, type of strikes. He's nearly equally proficient in both stances. Probably a little bit better in orthodox, a bit more comfortable, but, he's good in both stances. And when you pressure him, he will start to throw a lot more hooks. So if you get him near the fence, if you watch the Roza fight, he starts throwing hooks, starts trading, not using his reach against a Roza. And, that's when a Roza started taking over. But yeah, much better on the front foot, much better when he can use his distance. Alright, so for Zalal, he, as I said before, lots of movement. So he tries to walk you onto his strikes, tries to, back up, and then walk you onto the straight knees, flying knees, jabs, stick and move mostly. When he does pop the jab, but just in general, he keeps his lead hand low. So, he needs to watch out for the right hand of Woodson because he is dropping that lead hand. But yeah, he's mostly a guy that relies on footwork, head movement to avoid strikes, and that could get him in trouble in the small octagon against pressure fighters. And I think that's what Woodson's going to look to do, take the front foot in this fight. But Zalal, he can mix it up with the takedowns. He uses feints to set up his takedown entries quite well. But I'd say he's more dangerous in the scrambles. Like, he's very opportunistic with submissions in the scrambles. Like, he'll go for guillotines and darces when the opponent's trying to get back to their feet. He'll take the back of a turtled opponent. Even look for the darce on a turtled opponent. But yeah, he's very opportunistic with his submissions in the scrambles. And that's pretty much how Roza caught Woodson in his last fight. So Woodson does need to be careful in the scrambles and when he does get back to his feet, if, Zalal does take him down. But yeah, Woodson does have a lot of concerning tendencies in the grappling department, such as, he just pretty much lets opponents get their takedown entries really easily. Like, he'll allow them to get the body lock easily, doesn't really pummel that hard. His pummeling game is next to nothing, doesn't widen his base, doesn't seem to know what the next step is in, escaping the fence clinch. Also allows opponents to, get onto his legs really easily. When he does get taken down, he gives his back to get up basically every time. So yeah, quite concerning there. But yeah, how these guys win fights. So for Woodson, he's got a good frame for the division. He's good at effectively using his length too. Got to give him that. He's got good volume. As I said before, he doesn't put a lot behind his punches. Both these guys are well conditioned. I got to say Zalal's well conditioned as well. He's got, good cardio, all that kind of stuff. Doesn't necessarily have the same amount of volume as Woodson. I'd say there's going to be a big volume discrepancy here, but, he is well conditioned. And Zalal is durable. He's never been finished in how many fights? 14 fights. All his losses are by decision. And how these guys lose, on the other hand, so for Woodson, it's the grappling tendencies. We've already discussed that. And for Zalal, it's the striking tendencies we talked about before. Poor takedown defense. I think he struggles with the physicality of stronger opponents. He's probably at the weaker end of the spectrum in this weight class in terms of strength, in my opinion. So yeah, pass to victory for these two. So for Woodson, take the front foot, constantly pump out the jab, perpetuate that backwards movement of Zalal. Same as we just saw against against Cody Garbrandt. Rob Font did that very well. constant feints of the knee to discourage the takedown of Zalal. Also, extend your combinations when he is on his bike. You know, against the cage, when he's moving laterally against the cage, it's going to be harder for him to shoot a takedown. So yeah, look to really punish him when he's circling in one direction if you can get the read on where he's going. And then yeah, just look to extend your combinations, punish him when he is just moving laterally, not throwing anything back, so not really being offensive. And for Zalal, I think he needs to get his wrestling shoes on in this one, honestly. I think he needs to get into the clinch, push him to the fence, control him there, look to change levels, go for the double on the fence, and then, you know, pretty much, because in the clinch, his legs are very close together, like, and then they're just targets, the big, long, skinny legs, just, you know, clasp your hands around him, and then, you know, take him for a ride. Look for control over submissions and damage, you know, look to just keep him on the mat. And if you're having trouble with the double leg, look for the single leg and look to run the pipe. I mean, that's one of Zalal's go-to takedowns. I think they'll work on the long Woodson, because yeah, you take away one of his posts. But yeah, alright, so for Woodson, to counteract that, look for offense when he's stalling on a takedown. So Zalal does stall quite a bit on the takedown, so look for elbows, hammer fist, knees. Just look to really damage him when he is, you know, working really hard for that takedown, but he's also just kind of sitting there. And don't accept bottom position. Be careful when you're trying to get back to your feet, obviously. You know, don't give your back, or just be very careful when giving your back. But yeah, just don't accept bottom position, whatever you do. So how I see this fight going. So yeah, very interesting fight. On the feet, I don't think it's going to be very competitive, in my opinion. Zalal striking is just not very complete. Like, it's very erratic. It's a lot of singular shots. He has quite low volume. Like, against guys like Jordan Griffin and Peter Barrett, he's going to look like Anderson Silva out there. But in this fight, I wouldn't be so sure. I mean, if Woodson had any power, like in his hands, I think he'd probably put Zalal out, just with the way Zalal defends strikes and the amount of times Woodson is going to be hitting him. I think he's going to mark Zalal up on the feet. So I believe the smaller cage definitely favours Woodson, as Zalal doesn't have, you know, much space to move around and use his footwork. But it also shortens the distance that Zalal's going to have to back up and then walk Woodson onto his reactive takedowns or his knees, which, you know, he was doing quite well against Austin Lingo, and that's pretty much how he won the fight, just with the double legs. He was pretty much backing up and then getting Lingo to walk onto the double legs. So in the smaller cage, he's going to have less room to do that. In Woodson's last fight, when Roza looked to like heavily pressure Woodson, that was when he was having his best success in the fight. Like, when Woodson was, when Roza was hanging out at range against Woodson, you know, Sean was basically just piecing him up. And I think Woodson will be taking the front foot here, and he'll be backing Zalal up, landing his combinations, touching him up with the jab, scoring points, kind of looking the same as Rob Font versus Cody Garbrandt, as in Woodson is Rob Font. I'm expecting Zalal to wrestle here though, as his job's potentially on the line. I wouldn't be surprised if, you know, Zalal caught him in a submission in a scramble, or, you know, while Sean's trying to get back to his feet, catches him with submission there. But I do think the height and the upright posture of Woodson are probably going to save him from getting memed with a flying knee or something like that. But yeah, so in my opinion, the only path to victory for Zalal is the takedowns and the top control, which is a very viable path to victory, I must say. You know, from what we've seen from Woodson, his ground game looks next to nothing. His sprawl's okay, but if you get him against the fence, he makes a lot of like technical errors that his previous opponents haven't really made him pay for yet. But Zalal doesn't have the best takedowns. I mean, against bigger guys, he seems to struggle with the size. Like against Choi in their fight, you know, when he was trying to ground Choi, he had a lot of trouble doing that. He's spoken in the past about trying to get down to 135, but apparently at the USCPI they told him he'd be 0% body fat if he did, you know, try and make 135. So that right there kind of tells me that he's a little insecure about his strength against these other, like, you know, featherweights. Like, his frame's good for the division, it's just the strength just isn't there. And, you know, Woodson is much bigger. I think Woodson's long, skinny arms, you know, are probably going to help him get underhooks against Zalal here, who tends to stall a lot again on the takedowns. But I can absolutely see Zalal, like, dumping him in his ass a few times and getting some, you know, good top control. And that's probably why I wouldn't bet Woodson at this price, because there are a lot of glaring holes in his game, which Youssef, you know, can exploit. But I am expecting Woodson to win. I think he's going to outstrike him on the feet, maintain range, not get too over-aggressive, not over-engage in the clinch, especially when he's close to the fence, and feint a lot. And I think, you know, primarily just not get taken down. So I think he's going to do that enough that he does earn the decision. So yeah, also worth noting that James Krause was Zalal's main coach for quite some time, and then he moved to Factory X, so I imagine he knows Zalal's game quite well. And he's, game planned for Zalal multiple times. He knows where he's weak, he knows where his opponents would likely to attack him. And now Krause is the head coach of Sean Woodson, so I think they'll be definitely implementing a precise game plan here, quite targeted to the weaknesses of Zalal. So yeah, I do like that little wrinkle in the fight as well. But yeah, Zalal, I wanted to bet him pre-tape, because of the grappling tendencies of Woodson, and Zalal has gone for takedowns in the past, but yeah, just that Choi fight really threw me off. And, we'll have a look at his record. But yeah, if you look back on it, it's not as impressive as I thought it was. Lost to Choi, who's decent, he's good, he's okay. He's big too for the weight class. Toporia's a beast, no shame in losing to Topuria. But that was an 8 days notice for Ilya, so yeah. That's probably why he slowed down a little bit. Also the fact that Toporia's never seen the third round, so that's probably why Zalal had a bit of success in the third round. But yeah, Peter Barrett, not very good. Jordan Griffin got cut from the UFC. Austin Lingo has glaring holes in his game. Jamie Hernandez, 4-3. Lost to Matt Jones, Marissa Cal, who, if you're in the UFC, you should beat a guy like Jose Marizacal. But yeah, he lost to those guys. And then, the guys he's beat, 5-3, 3-1, 4-2. These guys aren't great. But yeah, that's his record. If you do look onto it, if you look, look into it, it's just not as impressive as I thought it was. But yeah, we'll have a look at the lines. So the prediction is Woodson. I think he gets it done by decision. I think he wins around 65 to 70% of the time these two fight. Some bets I was looking at. So Woodson at probably $1.70, which it looks like it's maybe heading in that direction. You want a good edge on guys like this with glaring holes in their game, especially when they're favourites. So I probably wouldn't bet him until he gets to like $1.70, which, could possibly. But yeah, not at that price. Fight goes the distance I'm looking at. These guys generally do go the distance. Woodson's last 4 of 6, I think, has gone the distance, and Zalal's last 7 of 8 have gone the distance, I believe. So if that price gets to like $1.60 or whatever that is in the money line, for Zalal sub, $7 probably. If Zalal subs like $7, Woodson does leave himself quite open for submissions, and Zalal is quite opportunistic with his submissions in the scrambles. So yeah, maybe $7 for Zalal sub plus 600. Probably bet that. But yeah,